Sammy here. Holly's not with us today because she's not feeling well. So I'm going to do one of the videos that I said I was going to do on my own. So I thought I'd talk about what happened last year. In April of 2011 or 2011, whatever people are finding it trendy to say these days, my mum and dad came over for a visit, and back in, obviously I live in the US and been here 10, 11 years, and our children grew up here. Oliver actually was born here, so we've been here over 11 years. Anyway, digress. We came here, so my parents lived in England, and my mother's from Spain, so a few years ago they retired to Spain. But anyway, they used to come here to visit once a year, usually, and stayed for about a month. And so last year, in April, they were coming to visit, and I had a really bad, and I'm not normally sick, but I had a really bad bout of laryngitis, and I lost my voice, and it was me without a voice is like, I don't know, Christmas without a turkey, well, for English people. Anyway, so I lost my voice, and my parents were coming, and I didn't want to, because they were going to go and see my brother and his wife and their new baby, and I didn't want them to take it, but I had sort of said, hey, why don't you guys not come now and come later in the year. But I'm glad now that that didn't happen. Anyway, they came, and they came in April, and they stayed for a few weeks, and we did, actually they didn't stay that long that time. They stayed probably 2 weeks, and they left on, I don't remember when, the 2nd, I think, of April, and they went to England, and my dad got to hold the baby for the first time, Isabel, and he was really ecstatic, and he retired a few years ago. So he was ecstatic, and so was my mum, and everything was wonderful. Anyway, they went back home to Spain, and in May, I think it was like the 5th or something, 6th. I have it written down, I had it documented because I had to write a letter to newspapers in Spain. He had a sore throat, and I can't imagine my guilt having had laryngitis when he was here. Anyway, he got a sore throat, and I got an email from my mum saying he'd been, this is before I had the FaceTime iPod, and I got an email from my mum saying that he was in hospital, and I wondered why, because my dad was a very healthy person, and he went to hospital, and they found out he had tonsillitis, so he had to have surgery because suddenly this thing got swollen. In fact, it turned out he had something called quinsy, which is a complication of tonsillitis, I think. I've looked it up, but I haven't really looked at it for a while. So he had surgery, and he came out, and they had him in a medically induced coma for a while, a week, and he was doing okay. He had to have a tracheotomy because he couldn't breathe, and then he started to develop all sorts of bacterial infections and stuff, and they had to put him back into a coma. But just before that happened, they put him back into the ward, and he started having problems breathing, so even with the tracheotomy, he was taken back to ICU. Anyway, the hospital was horrible. It was down in southern Spain, in Malaga. I'm not going to say what hospital. And he was in and out of coma, but we were having problems here with my husband's health. So my mum said, don't do anything. I didn't have a current passport because I hadn't been away overseas for a long time. Anyway, so we were dealing with my husband's issues, health issues, and long story short, he was out of a coma for a few days. He was doing better, everything was improving every single day for that month while he was in the hospital. Every phone call that we received, I was dreading it. It was horrible. But while he was there, I made this stupid pact with a higher entity, which I didn't regret making, but in retrospect it was stupid. I made a pact not to eat until my dad could. He wasn't supposed to die anyway. So we got a news on the Friday, the 3rd of June, from my brother. We got news he'd gone to Spain, and we got news that they'd got a call from the hospital saying that my dad had died. And so my husband came up to tell me, because I was in bed because I hadn't slept for 4 weeks. And he came up and said, and obviously that was horrible. And then we got a call a few hours later saying that he was fine. The hospital had made a mistake. Now, this is a hospital that you're only allowed to visit your loved one twice a day, only for an hour each time. And outside the ICU, there are people screaming at each other, at the staff, outside an ICU. Anyway, so this one woman found out that her husband had died because they would call your name if your loved one was available to receive a visitor or visitors. And this woman wasn't called, and then she went up to the window and said, well, can I go and see my husband? And they said, well, no, he's dead. That's how they told her. Anyway, we got a call in the middle of the night, again on the Saturday, going into the Saturday, to say he was fine. He was in a coma, he had to be revived, and he was all right, but he was deteriorating, and at this point his organs were starting to fail. The day before, or actually the day he went into hospital in May, he was cutting down trees. While he was here in April, he was playing Wii Sports 2, I think, with the children running around. So he was fine. He was a healthy man. His blood pressure was fine. He had fine cholesterol. He was very healthy. He walked a lot. He did a lot of, he used my exercise bike all the time. Anyway, that Saturday we tried to sleep a little bit. And then on the Sunday, they got obviously called to the hospital on Saturday night and told that things were looking bad. Then on the Sunday they were there and they saw all these doctors running to the ICU, and then they were allowed to see him because he'd died. And I wasn't there. He hadn't been able to talk since he had started. Since the surgery, and he had been able to write for a while, a few letters. And he said, he wanted to see me and my brother. because he thought he was going to die until he started to improve. He thought he was going to die. But, anyway, he had said he wanted to see us, and I didn't have my passport. And Wade was having, my husband was having these things where he'd pass out, so we had to deal with that. Anyway. So, how do I cope with it? I started exercising. Well, I've always exercised, but I started exercising obsessively. And I know that's a problem. I work out 3.5 hours a day on the treadmill. And I do weights every other day, again for 1.5 hours. So some days I'm working out practically the whole time that my children are at school. I also haven't started eating properly because of that stupid pact I made. Obviously I'm not dead. And obviously I stood, you know, I'm drinking milk. I eat fish at night. And I eat chocolate. And I had this thing last week where I couldn't eat for a week because I had sores in my mouth. And my son, my 10-year-old son, says maybe you've become diabetic because of your diet. Which is probably a possibility. But anyway, after it all happened, we went, finally got the passports, I had them issued, emergency issued. We went, I went with my 3 children to England, and how obsessive I am, I took my weights with me. You know, over clothes and shoes and stuff. And I went to Spain. Saw my mum, she'd lost weight and she couldn't afford to lose it either. And that was the first time in my life that I'd ever seen my mum without my dad. Anyway, so we were in Spain and I put a video of our thing in Spain. And we went to England, went to see his burial site. And then came back home with my mum, and I said, you know, being the daughter and being the, you know, what they do in Spanish culture, I offered her our home, you know, permanently, because my brother wouldn't do it, and because she's difficult. So we took her in. My eldest son wasn't impressed because, although she's his grandmother, she's difficult. And if she ever finds this video, she's probably going to hate me, but she already does anyway. So we, she was here from the beginning of September, no, August through to October, beginning of October. And everything went fine, remarkably. Hadn't really expected it, but it went fine. She had to go back because of her medical insurance, because she's European, and you know, to get insurance here at that age is hard. So she went back to Spain and England, and while she was gone, my husband had to go away on business, and it turned out that he had to go. He was in Las Vegas, so he decided to drive to California, to see Northern California, to see his family, because he hadn't seen them for a year, and he was that close he thought he'd drive. And so he did that, and so I told my mum that his return flight had been changed and he might not get back until the day after she arrived back. And so apparently that was the floodgates that opened for her to decide that it was a good idea to go crazy and start telling me exactly how she felt about me. The fact that I hadn't been there when my dad had been begging for me to be there. Begging, she made out that he was begging for me, even though, well, I don't know. I'm not going to go there. Anyway, it was because of I told her that she might have to pay for a taxi ride back from the airport. She decided to tell me that what an ungrateful daughter I was, how hateful I was, because I hadn't been there for my dad, and how I'd never cared, and how my husband cared more about his family because he was driving to California from Las Vegas, which, if you consider the cost of doing that, as opposed to the cost of going from the US, from the East Coast to southern Spain with the children, is huge. Big difference. But anyway, she decided that she was going to say this just because of a freaking taxi ride from Washington, D.C. to our house. Hold on. Anyway, because of the cab fare, she decided that she was going to let loose and tell me what an ungrateful daughter I was, how selfish I was, how I only ever thought about myself, which is a bullshit lie because I've always been her doormat. And I wasn't sure if she would come back. And frankly, at that point, I didn't want her to come back. So my husband turned out that he was coming back a few hours before she was due back, and so he decided. I mean, he emailed her or something, because at that point, after what she'd said to me, I mean, having lost my dad, and then what she said to me, I couldn't talk to her, and so he decided to email her and ask her if she was coming, and she said no. But in January of this year, I think it was January of 2012, she went to Florida to visit friends, and then she said she wanted to pick up all her stuff because she'd left a lot of stuff here. We had made my husband's den into her bedroom, because down here we have a full bathroom and a den, and this is an above ground basement, and so she had her own space down here. She had this big room, she had a room, you know, her bedroom, she had her bathroom, she used my gym whenever she wanted to, she did whatever she wanted to. So we packed up all her stuff, or he did, and then took it to the airport. And my brother had said, "What will it take to resolve this? You know, to fix this?" And I said, "It will take an apology, because what she said is something I'll never be able to forget, even if I'm able to forgive, amongst all the other things I've always had to." Anyway, that's a different story. So I said that it would take an apology, and he let her know, and she said there was nothing for her to apologise for. So she's now suing the hospital where he was killed, and she, through my daughter, Holly, who's not here right now, had emailed her and said that she wanted me to sign some papers to be named in the lawsuit, but I said I didn't want to drag this out. I don't want to do this. She's not going to win. The system there is so corrupt anyway, and there's no money, and she's not going to win. And it doesn't matter, because even if she won, what does she achieve? Nothing. They probably won't. They won't do anything to the doctors. The hospital will be fine. I did a lot of research after he died, when I was writing the letters to the newspapers, and he's not the only one who's died there. And the treatment there, my brother recorded the sound outside the emergency room, not the emergency room, the ICU, and it was horrendous. It sounded worse than the cattle market. I've done a little shrine like I showed you in that pumpkin video of photos of my dad with the children, and I don't like myself in photographs. I probably have very few of those. I haven't, I've taken it down many times. I've put it back up. I haven't been able to look. The videos that we made when he was here with the children playing the Wii, I've not been able to look at once. How do I cope with stress, with grief? I don't. I've buried my head in the sand. I'm not thinking about it. He's not here, nor is my mum, so I don't have to think about it. While she was here, I was crying every day because I just couldn't fathom the fact that he was no longer here. The hug that I gave him the day he died, the day he left. We're not huggy people with my parents. I am with the children, obviously, but not with my parents. And I just want to give him one more hug. I told him, I mean, the whole love thing, it wasn't something that my parents ever said. But when he was in the hospital, and he must have realised why, I kept telling him I loved him. Obviously he couldn't say it back. Just want one more chance. The thing is, and this is really stupid and pathetic, but when I was about 15, I was told, I went to a palm reader, and I was told I was going to die last year, so I never fathomed that my parents would die before me. And I know it's stupid for a child not to think that, not to contemplate it, but I didn't think that having anticipated that for so many years, I was kind of worried about last year, obviously, but the big loss wasn't me, it was my dad, and I really just had not thought about it because I had never expected it to happen, which is stupid, but he was so healthy. So I don't know, maybe I should go talk to someone. I think that's it.